Thank you for joining me for Ready, Aim, Stamp. I don't know about you, but lately I have been seeing a lot of slimline cards in my Pinterest feeds, and I'm not sure if that's just because they're super popular right now, or if I'm like behind the times and because I pinned a couple that I liked, now they're all coming up because, I know that's what the feeds do. But I really like them, so I decided that I would make a slimline card. And my original one, this one has a little bit of a bigger border because the original size was smaller. It was using an 8.5 by 3.5 folded, and I just felt like that left way too much space in the number 10 envelope. So I decided to change it up and use it as 9 1/4 by 4 inches folded. So you're going to use a 9 1/4 by 8 inch piece of paper for your card base. So basically you end up using one full piece of cardstock for the card base. So that's the drawback, but these cards are really fun. And I like having another option for card size and to be able to fit it in a number 10 envelope. All right, let me get things ready and then I'll show you how I made this card. All right, so my card base is going to be out of Whisper White. And so I am going to need to trim my card down. And it doesn't really matter which way you start to trim it down. You can trim it down to the 8 inch first or the 9 1/4. But if you're using the Stampin' Up! Paper trimmer, you'll want to pull out the arm to help you measure. Try to get this so you can see. So then you're going to line up to the 8 inch side and just slice that little 1/2 inch off, and then turn it and measure to the 9 1/4 inch side, or you could do it the other way around. And then you can keep those, especially this chunk. It's a big enough chunk that you can get quite a bit done with. Okay, and then I am going to score it at 4 inches. And the scoring blade is the lighter gray, and the cutting blade is the darker gray. So I have that ready. I already cut my layered piece of white, but I didn't cut my layered piece of Moonlit Midnight. Is that the right name for it? Oops, Misty Moonlight. So I'm going to cut it now. And since I'm only using the piece for layering, I am going to be a little pickier. And I'm going to cut it to 3 3/4. Go in the long direction. I guess portrait view. And then I'm going to trim that down to 9 inches. There we go. So then those will layer, and they'll be kind of a fatter layer than sometimes is always done as the border of the blue, but I like that because I want to see that pretty blue paper. All right, just a sec. So now we have our layers. We have Whisper White cut at 9 1/4 by 4 inches, or sorry, 9 1/4 by 8 inches with a score at the 4 inches. We have another piece of Whisper White cut at 8 1/4 by 3 1/4 inches. And we have a piece of Misty Moonlight that is cut at 9 inches by 3 3/4 inches. So I'm going to take a moment and just burnish the fold on our card base. All right, and then I can set that aside. And for a minute, we're going to focus on the smaller piece of Whisper White. And I'm just going to grab a piece of scratch paper. And it looks like I need to add a little bit better lighting, so let me do that. Okay, so the next step is that I am going to sponge the sky onto that piece of Whisper White, and I'm going to be using Seaside Spray as the ink pad and one of the sponge daubers. And you can use any cloud shape. This one I used one of the paper pumpkin outlines, and I just traced and cut my own to use out of just scratch paper. So I am by no means an expert at this. I just kind of muddle along until I get it looking the way I want it to. I'm gonna, whoops, not zoom out. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. So you just kind of get your sponge dauber inked up and then kind of push it off to see what it's like. Line up your cloud kind of how you think you might want it to look, and come from the mask, which is our cloud shape, onto the panel for the card. And I just kind of, like I said, I'm not an expert. There are some paper artists out there that make some very beautiful things with their sponging. I have a long ways to go and a lot to learn. So there's my first part of the cloud, and then I want to put some cloud over here. And I think I'm gonna, let's see, nope, I'm gonna leave it this way. If you look at this cloud shape, there's like a really big puffy cloud part, and then there's some smaller. And I want to have a little bit of variation in my clouds. The one thing I do know is that you're always supposed to start off on away from the paper that you're actually wanting to sponge, and it gets some of that really thicker ink away. Probably want to do some kind of different like swooshes. Forgot about this side. Okay. And then I want another funny little cloud over here. I'm not sure exactly what I did before. Maybe something like that. And I'm trying to make sure I get up into the sky, because my clouds aren't perfectly white, and they're not going to be because I'm going to sponge on them too. I just want that nice darker outline of where the clouds are. Okay, so now I am going to take away the mask, and I'm just going to try to, see, like I said, I'm definitely not an expert, and I try to get in a hurry and push too hard or something with the sponge dauber, but so I want to slow down and be very gentle. Pull some color into the cloud too. Just so it's not too blaringly white. They can be happy clouds, but they don't need to be super white clouds. Okay, and then Looks like I'm rubbing some of my sponge off. That's probably why I'm getting that little harder line. All right, so there are my clouds, and they are far from perfect, but they are my clouds. So now I can set that piece aside for a little bit. I'm going to keep my scrap paper down here because I cut out some die cut shapes that we would need. We're going to use this leaf one, and then we're using this bird outline and these legs, and then the nest and the eggs. And I've already pre-cut all the shapes. And the ones that we're going to deal with first are these. And I cut them out of Whisper White, but you'll see that they are not white in here. Now there's not a stamp image that fits those exactly. There's another branch and there's some leaves, but they don't fit that. So what I took was Stampin' Blends, and I colored my branches. So I used the dark soft suede for the branch color, and light old olive for my leaves, and light cherry cobbler for the berries or cherries or whatever they are. And I just took the brush end and colored along, trying to get the edges kind of too, otherwise your white paper will show through. And that may not be a big deal, but I just wanted it to take on the color. There we go. So now I have my branches. And I'm going to set those aside so that we can do our stamping. And I believe I'm done with this scratch paper, but I won't make it go too far just in case. I am going to grab my Stamparatus, and I have kind of a template that I saved from when I had die cut out the shapes, and I like to keep those with my die cuts where I have a stamp image that goes within that die cut. I find that if I save them, then I can reuse it to help line up with the stamps later, and then I don't have to be as picky about the other card when I'm or the other cardstock when I'm cutting it out. So first we're going to do the bird and the legs. And tell you what, I have the hardest time with the legs. And I think I did cut the wrong legs this time too, see? Because I always look at it the way that the stamp appears here, and I forget that this is going to be reversed when you stamp it. Actually, no, this is the wrong. See, I told you, I'm not good at this. These legs, okay, so this is the one that I want with the long claw, long leg on the right, and the short one on the left. And I'm just kind of eyeballing it to see if that lines up within that space where I want it to. And then I'm going to grab that bird that matches the outline, one with a little bit extra tail feather, and I'm just going to put it in there, and once again kind of eyeball, and I can move it around if I want to, but it looks good. So then I'm going to bring the plate over from the Stamparatus and pick that up, and I want my everything to stay where it was so it'll line up good. Now I'm going to put the shapes that I had cut out back into the cardstock. And I'm going to ink them up. The claws I am inking in Bumblebee. And the bird I am inking in, I guess I'm going to ink it in Early Espresso. I don't know if I did it in Early Espresso or in Soft Suede last time, but I'll go ahead and do it in Early Espresso. All right. And then I'm just gonna press those on there. And I have my little die cuts. Oh, I did the wrong bird. I did the wrong background on the bird. Oh, that's funny. The stamp. It's the right die that I wanted, but I did the full. I guess this bird will just be a little bit different than the other bird. All right. I had meant to do just the partial of the bird because there's this part for that same bird, and that's what I used before, but that's okay. It'll still look great. So now I just will have to stamp that on there also. And I can remove my legs and get them out of the way. And now it's a little easier to line up the stamp because you can see an image that's already been stamped on there. Once again, I'm going to push my plate on. It tries to pick everything up, of course. So my little guide here kind of is nice because if it does do that and tries to pick everything up, I can always just reposition back into that corner. And then put this back in there. And I'm going to use Early Espresso again because it'll just be darker where those same inkings lie. This one must be the female bird because they're darker than the male birds. The other one on the other card's a little daddy bird. Okay. So, move the little birdie out of the way too. And, oh, whoops, I have the eggs on there, don't I? Okay. So the eggs on the stamp, they are one stamp, so they're connected. And that's really nice because then those line up with the eggs in the die. And the die just cuts the 3 eggs out that way too. So, and I kept when I took the eggs out of the die, I kept them in the order that they were. I'm not sure that they're interchangeable, and honestly, I'm kind of too afraid, especially right now on video, to interchange them and find out that they're not interchangeable. So for the eggs, I am going to ink those up with Crumb Cake. Okay. Figured these were like little yellow finches or something. I don't know if yellow finch, the females, have a lot of yellow on them or if they can go brown, but I'm just going to pretend. So there are my eggs. And then the next thing I need to stamp is the nest. And I have it cut out and have a different template for the nest. Let's see, I think I'm going to pull it out this way. And I have, the nest is die cut out of soft suede cardstock, and I am going to ink it up on the early espresso. And I'm going to line that up. You could have lined it up with the stamp, or with the extra piece on there, but because there's such a difference between the white and the soft suede, I figured I would just place the stamp on there with that die cut in there, especially since my photopolymer stamps have such a tendency to pick up the paper and bring it with it. All right. Back to the early espresso. When you're using the Stamparatus, it helps to have a stamp case or something of equal height underneath the arms so that you can evenly ink up your stamp. And there we have our beautiful nest. And let me get this cleaned up, my stamp away, and then we will assemble our card. Okay, so I have all of our layers gathered together. I grabbed my silicone craft sheet, my liquid multi-glue, and some dimensionals, and we're going to assemble this card. I really like the wiggle room that the multi-glue offers. Sometimes it's nice to use the snail, or now it's called Stampin' Seal. I can't remember. I'll have to look that up. But I really like my multi-purpose glue. So I'm just going to layer down first my piece of Misty Moonlight. And then we have our fun cloud piece. It goes whichever way you want. I think I'll just put it that way. Oh wait, I guess before I do that, I actually want to glue on my little branches, because one of them is going to hang off the edge just a little bit, and so I want to trim that before I glue it down to my card base. So I'm going to just lay this on the silicone mat and put just some spots of glue. And with the silicone mat, I can be a little bit messy and not worry about it making it stick down on there. So then I'm going to place this with one of the edges sticking off. I don't want it to be too high on the card because I need to have room for my bird and my nest. Then I am going to take the other branches. See if you can see that in there. I'm going to put some glue on it. You don't have to cover it. They do have the really nice adhesive sheets that you could stick this to, and even before you run it through the die cut, and then that makes it as a sticker. But I almost always forget that I need to do that. All right, so then things are going to be covered up right there, so it's all right if they look very similar or kind of wonky. But now I have that ready, and I'm just going to take my paper snips and just snip off that little bit that was hanging off. And now I can apply my glue to this layer and stick it on to the card base. All right. And I have a bigger, bigger edge than I thought. So good thing I had that glue. Now I have a little bit of a mess that I'm gonna have to come in and clean up with my white eraser when it dries, because I was stuck on my thinner frames. Okay, so then I'm gonna clean off my silicone craft sheet real quick and flip it over so that that glue doesn't interfere. So I'm gonna take my hands are getting all gluey. I did order the take your pick tool. I'm just waiting for it to come so that I can stop being stuck on everything. So I am going to put a little bit of glue on the bottom front of each of these eggs and glue them into the nest. I want to do it on the front so that it'll show through. And there we have this beautiful eggs in the nest. That's gonna dry. Let's see, I'll let it dry that way. And we need to put our legs on our bird. And I think I'm actually going to grab one of my yellow, maybe even bumblebee markers, and add some yellow to this mama bird. So like the blends, the Stampin' Right markers have like the pointy pin tip and then the brush tip. I'm going to just take my brush tip, kind of color in on the lighter parts to add a little yellow. There we go. So now my little legs, I am going to put just a little bit of glue. Hopefully I'm in the frame. Just a little tiny dab of glue on each leg. And then for me to line it up, it's easier if I'm looking at it the front way. And then I'm going to line up my bird. And just to make that eye stand out, I'm going to put a little wink of Stella on the eye. And then I want to glue the bird by its legs to the nest. So I'm going to turn this and get my little glue spots out of the way. And the silicone mat makes it hard to pick it up. There we go. Put some glue on the claws. Have the bird perched on the nest. Then the bird and the nest are going to get dimensionals placed on the back. You don't have to use a whole lot, just enough to give it a little bit of lift. And then, get that out of the way, peel the backing off. And place the bird in the nest on the branch how you like it. Okay, so we have one with the wider Misty Moonlight border, one with the wider Whisper White border, maybe a daddy bird and a mommy bird. Let me know what you think. Do you like the wider white border, the wider misty moonlight? What do you think of the birds? Leave me a comment, and hopefully you enjoyed Ready Aim Stamp. This is another card that I made with the slimline design. It's really great for getting those bigger images, more of them to fit on there. Thank you so much for joining me.